Hi there. How's your sex life? Well, I bet you don't get asked that every day. Maybe you should. Even if no one's talking about it, we know people are thinking about it. And you might want to make some changes. So today's video is 3 improvements that you can make for sexual intimacy in marriage. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Mary Whitman Ortiz, Christian sex educator, relationship coach, and author. And I love creating this safe space for Christians to talk about sex. So please subscribe, like my videos, share. New ones come out every Friday. All right, let's dive in. What are those 3 things you can do to improve your sex life? And I have these framed in some questions for you. So first of all, what do you want more of or less of in your sex life? And maybe I could also say, what bothers you in your sex life? Sometimes when the problems jump out and get our attention most. What this question does is gives you permission to think about those things and also says, hey, you are the only one who really knows. You are the authority on how you show up in your sex life. And if you want it to be different, it starts with you. I'm gonna put a few headings in this question that might prompt some of your thoughts. Are these physical changes that you want? Are these physical changes during lovemaking? Is this foreplay? Is this types of touch? Is this types of flirting? Is this about positions? Is this about the cuddling afterwards? So all of those physical components. Or do you want changes in the emotional component? We've had a whole series on oneness, and it's a foundation of how God brings husband and wife together, and there is the emotional bonding because that's God's pattern. God's pattern is always about respect and seeing the whole person, and maybe you're missing some of that and it's affecting your sex life. So that's really good for you to know about yourself. And then you may be unsure of what your beliefs about sex, how they are impacting all of your choices. We come into marriage with previous experiences, previous messages from culture, things from our church world, all kind of get stirred in there, and maybe you haven't separated those ideas out to know which ones do you choose for you instead of which ones do you just enter into by default. So little bit of work there determining what do you want more of and what do you want less of. Now your second question, kind of the direction we were just heading, is how does God's point of view about sex in marriage affect you? How does it affect you? Is it in the forefront of your thoughts? Is it that thing that's kind of nagging in the background? And how do you want it to affect you more? So while you are beginning to ponder all of those questions, I have to reassure you why you're having those questions that maybe you never identified before. Here's some thoughts. The church is largely silent on the topic of sex. So all of that, misinformation, missing information, all of those things have a role in your life, and maybe you didn't identify it. Also, you might not be clear on what's healthy, or what I like to say, what's okay in marriage. There are a lot of couples that talk to me and say, what's permissible for a Christian in their sex life? Those kind of questions might be nagging at you and you need to dive into it. Have you had shame around the idea of sex? Now this could come, as I said before, from your family, from church messages. Also, if you're looking at what's in the media and the example that's set for you there, that's very selfish. And if you disagree with that, then it may be a tug of war internally. So identifying what shame has played, what role it's played in your life. Maybe you're unsure of how to talk to your spouse. More on that one in just a bit. But if you have difficulty over delicate topics, then sex is probably at the top of the list. And see, when you first get married, woo, it's usually just carefree and there's no discussion because it's easier. It's only after all the responsibilities that kick in during married life that those conversations sometimes are more difficult. So it may catch you by surprise that now it feels awkward to talk about. And then also it can be difficult to resolve conflict, period. It can be more difficult to resolve conflict around sex because your needs, wants, desires, perspectives are at play, and so are your spouses. So two very different whirlwind sets of beliefs and experiences are now coming into that oneness again. So there's a lot there. The big question there was, how does God's view on sex and marriage affect you? And then my third question for you, how do you talk with your spouse in a way that opens up and makes things feel safe? Big question there. As soon as you are practicing some trust and vulnerability, maybe in other areas, sometimes it's easier to learn these skills in an area that's not quite as difficult. So maybe talking about finances, they're talking about parenting, talking about how you spend your time, your recreation. All those could be potential conflicts. So if you can practice in a lesser stress area, then by the time you get to these topics in regards to sex, that might be a little easier for you. But in a nutshell, to talk about sex with your spouse, tell them what you've discovered, because you've already done a lot of work by this point, and then ask, what's your perspective? What do you think about it? So this doesn't have to be, you have to see it my way or I'll die, okay? This is, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm maturing. I want to improve our sex life. That's a great encouragement if you express it in a way that's supportive. And I want to improve my sex life with you in our marriage because I know it will make our marriage better. All right, I gave you a lot to process here, and I have a free gift for you that I think will help you peg where you are right now. It's my Rate Your Intimacy quiz, and there's a series of questions there for you to understand how easy it is or isn't to talk about sex. And in conjunction with those questions that gives you answers, there are steps for you to do wherever you peg on that whole spectrum. So that is something that can help you, and I will put the comments below. So make sure you look for that link and get yourself one step further improving your sex life. Thanks so much for joining me today. Remember, Father God wants to lavish His love on every area of your life, including sexual intimacy in marriage.